The first time I met his mother, I knew I was already on trial. She didn't need to say much. Her eyes did most of the talking. Every glance was a quiet reminder that I didn't belong in their world. She sat across the table in her pearl necklace in perfect posture, asking me questions that sounded polite but felt like traps. So, what do your parents do? Where did you go to school? Her smile was soft, but her tone sliced right through my confidence. I answered as calmly as I could, even when I could tell she wasn't listening. She was judging. Later that evening, when he walked me to my car, she pulled him aside. I didn't mean to overhear, but her voice carried. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Women like her bring nothing but trouble." My chest tightened. I remember gripping my keys until they left marks in my palm. That was the first warning, the one I tried to ignore. He came to me later that night, guilt written all over his face. "Don't listen to her," he whispered. "She just doesn't know you yet." But deep down, I knew she didn't want to know me. To her, I was everything she'd spent her life protecting him from, a reminder that love doesn't always look like status or skin tone. Still, I stayed. I told myself love would soften her edges, that kindness could change a heart set in stone. I wanted to believe that if I loved him hard enough, it would be enough for both of us. I didn't realize then that some warnings aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to prepare you for the heartbreak ahead. When we got married, I thought the hardest part was behind us. I believed that love, once spoken in vows, could silence every whisper, every doubt. The ceremony was beautiful: white roses, champagne laughter, the flash of cameras. But even then, I noticed her. His mother stood near the aisle, hands clasped tight, wearing a smile that felt more like surrender than joy. When we kissed, her eyes didn't soften. They hardened, as if to say, "We'll see how long this lasts." At first, marriage felt like sunlight after a storm. We bought a small house near the city, filled it with music, late night takeout, and shared dreams. I cooked his favorite meals, left notes in his briefcase, waited up for him when work ran late. But slowly, the warmth began to fade. Not from us, but from everything around us. His mother's presence lingered like perfume that wouldn't wash off. She called every day, critiqued every choice, from my hair to our furniture. "A woman should never let her husband live in clutter," she'd say. "It reflects badly on him." He started to repeat her words, at first gently, then sharply. "You should try to be more like her," he told me one night after I'd spent hours preparing dinner. "She always knew how to make a house feel proper." That word, proper, hung in the air like a curse. I realized then that I wasn't building a marriage. I was fighting to exist in someone else's version of perfection. I tried harder. I smiled at luncheons where I didn't belong, laughed at jokes that bruised my pride, and wore dresses she approved of instead of the ones that felt like me. I thought if I could just fit in, if I could prove myself, things would change. But the more I molded myself to their image, the more invisible I became. He stopped seeing the woman who once made him dream. He only saw his mother's reflection in everything I did wrong. And every time I reached for his hand, I could feel her fingerprints already there. That was when I realized I wasn't his wife. I was a guest in a life designed by someone else, a stranger living in a marriage that never truly belonged to me. The fall didn't happen all at once. It came quietly, like a slow leak in a roof you don't notice until the whole house floods. At first, it was the late nights. He said he was working. I believed him because I wanted to. Love makes fools of even the strongest hearts. Then came the distance, the kind that no amount of conversation could fill. He stopped asking how my day was, stopped noticing the small things that once made us laugh. I'd talk to him, and it was like throwing words into an empty hallway. His mother's visits became more frequent. She brought along a woman I'd never met before, perfectly polished, with soft curls and expensive perfume. "This is Claire," she'd say sweetly. "She's been helping your husband with some of the charity work." Charity, I remember thinking bitterly, the kind that gives you nothing but takes everything. I'd catch them whispering in corners, exchanging looks that said more than words ever could. Still, I tried to hold on. I told myself I was overthinking it, that no man I loved so deeply could betray me this easily. But the truth has a cruel way of revealing itself. One evening, he invited me to a gala, said it was important for appearances. I wore the dress he liked, smiled through the nerves, and walked into that glittering room at his side. Then I saw it, his mother beaming and her standing beside him wearing the same shade of red lipstick I'd worn on our wedding day. The cameras flashed, and he didn't even pull away when her hand brushed his arm. The humiliation burned through me, hotter than any flame. When I confronted him that night, he didn't deny it. He just sighed, tired, detached, and said, "You were never meant for this life," as if I was some passing mistake he needed to outgrow. I packed my things that night, every item a memory, every step a piece of myself breaking off. When the door closed behind me, it wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the death of a woman who believed love could conquer cruelty. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my becoming. When I left that mansion, I had nothing but a suitcase and my name. But sometimes, that's all a woman really needs. Her name and the will to start again. For weeks, I slept on my cousin's couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he'd said, every lie I'd swallowed just to keep the peace. I remember thinking, how do you rebuild when everything you built was never yours to begin with? But pain, when used right, can become the sharpest kind of power. I started small. I took the skills his company had dismissed, my ideas, my work ethic, my patience, and poured them into my own vision. I registered a business under my name, helped women like me who'd been left with nothing after men like him walked away. I worked day and night, fueled by heartbreak, but guided by something stronger: purpose. The first check I received wasn't much, but it felt heavier than gold. It was proof that I could stand without their name, without their permission. Months turned into years. My company grew, and with it, so did I. Newspapers started writing about the woman who rebuilt herself from ashes. People called me resilient. I smiled, but only I knew the truth. I wasn't just resilient, I was reborn. And while I was rising, karma was doing her quiet work on the other side. I started hearing whispers. His company was under investigation, his business partners backing out, his reputation crumbling under the weight of greed and ego. His mother's health was failing, and the woman he left me for had vanished the moment the money ran out. The same society that once praised them now turned its back. I never wished them harm, not once. But I won't lie, when I saw his name in the papers, drowning in the very pride that once made him leave me, I felt peace, because I had spent years proving my worth to people who couldn't see it. Now I didn't need to. I had already become the woman they swore I'd never be: independent, unbroken, and unforgettable. The forgotten wife had become the headline they could never ignore. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but a familiar voice. His. I hadn't heard it in years, yet the sound still carried that same quiet authority, though now it was laced with something new: desperation. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to see you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Please." For a moment, I almost hung up. But something in me, not love, not pity, but closure, made me agree. When I arrived at the old mansion, the place looked nothing like the one I remembered. The once immaculate gardens were overgrown, the grand doors weathered, and the air heavy with silence. The same woman who had once looked down on me from the marble staircase was now lying in bed upstairs, frail and fading. His mother. I hadn't imagined I'd ever see her again. As I walked through those halls, every step echoed with memories of laughter that wasn't real, dinners that felt like interrogations, and the version of me that had lived there, trying so hard to be accepted. He met me at the door of her room. His eyes were sunken, his suit wrinkled, his arrogance gone. "She's not well," he said softly. "She keeps asking for you." I wanted to ask why. Why now, after everything? But instead, I followed him in. She turned her head slowly, her voice weak but clear. "You came," she whispered. "I was wrong about you." The words hung in the air like a confession years too late. I nodded, not out of forgiveness, but out of peace. Later, As he walked me to the car, he said, I lost everything, except the memory of you. His eyes searched mine for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe hope. But what he found was calm. You didn't lose me, I said quietly. You let me go. And with that, I turned away. The rain had stopped, and the sky broke open with light, soft and golden. It felt like the universe itself was closing the chapter for me. I didn't come back to gloat or to grieve. I came back to prove that even broken things can return whole and stronger than before. When I walked into her room the next morning, the house was still. The nurses whispered, the curtains were half drawn, and the smell of medicine filled the air. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not the commanding woman who once made me feel like an intruder, but a fragile one, humbled by time and truth. Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. I thought I was protecting him, she said weakly, but I was just protecting my pride. I didn't know what to say. For years I had dreamed of this moment, the apology that would never come. And yet, here it was, spoken in a whisper softer than regret. Tears slipped down her cheek. You were the only one who ever loved him right, she said. The words pierced through me, not as validation, but as release. I realized then that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the story they wrote for you. I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. When she passed later that day, he called me, his voice breaking. She asked for you in her final breath, he said. I don't know how to live with what I've done. I wanted to comfort him, but I couldn't carry his guilt. You'll learn, I said softly. That's what loss does. It teaches. Before I left, he asked if I could ever love him again. I looked at him, the man I once would have given everything for, and saw a stranger. I don't love you, I said gently, but I wish you healing. Then I walked away, not in anger, but in quiet triumph. Because sometimes the truest goodbye is simply choosing yourself. When I stepped out of that mansion for the last time, the sun was rising, soft golden light spilling over the driveway like a promise. The air felt different, lighter. I wasn't the woman who once entered those doors, desperate to be loved or seen. I was someone new, someone free. In the months that followed, I didn't chase revenge or validation. I built peace. My company flourished, not because I wanted to prove a point, but because I finally believed I could. I started speaking at women's events, sharing my story with those who thought heartbreak was the end. I told them the truth. Sometimes, losing love is how you find yourself. One evening, as I stood on a stage filled with women clapping for my journey, I realized something profound. I hadn't just survived, I had transformed. The girl who once begged for acceptance had become the woman who defined her own worth. So now, when people ask if I'd ever take him back, I smile and say, no need. I took back myself. Because in the end, the greatest power isn't in being chosen. It's in choosing who you become after the pain.